Fear is a big part of the gap. I don't think it's the only gap, but we fear the unknown and change is unknown.
Hmm.
We fear uncertainty and change makes us uncomfortable.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Meller, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. Today we welcome in speaker and entrepreneur Dallin Cooper. And at the heart of Dallin's message is this understanding that we can only be ready for what we want once we establish our desires and create the type of human behavior that can serve optimal growth. Hello there, and welcome back into the most recent installment of Growth Ready. I am so excited to be welcoming in a gentleman who I got to know about a year and a half ago, and I'm sure we'll tell a little bit of our backstory as we go through this conversation. But Dallin Cooper, Dallin, I'm excited to have you here, brother. Please, before I let you go any further, tell us, what does it mean to be growth ready to you?
When I think about growth and I guess associatedly growth ready, I think about progress. I'm a big fan of progress, and I use that word probably more than I use growth, but they're synonyms, so whatever. And I always want to be in a spot where I am progressing, because if you aren't moving forward, you're probably moving backwards. And one of my great fears, just generally, is to be that guy who looks back at me 5 or 10 years ago or whenever and think, wow, what happened? Like, I had it. Those were the golden days. Like, I never want to look back and say those were the golden years and when everything was good, because that means I'm going backwards. I always want to say, wow, I was an idiot 5 years ago, because that means I have grown, I have learned something, and I've moved forward. So being in a spot where I am wanting to move forward, that's growth makes me think progress. The growth ready makes me think of being okay with that progress, because progress means change, and change is often uncomfortable. But I want to be comfortable with change.
I love it. I love it. And straight away, just this across everything that you just provided there, the insight of the want. The want is such a telling part of that answer to me, because, again, progress, growth, however you want to look at it, two very similar words, no doubt about it. I'm sure if we did a dictionary.com search, we could find a couple of differences, but who knows? We'll just agree we'll agree on that for now, that we have synonyms. But the fact is that there has to be that want. Like, without the want, progress, based on what you're just providing here, it sounds as though there's not much of a assurance, let's say, attached to that progress without the want. So I'm curious, when you speak about your want for progress, are you able to maybe pinpoint where that appetite, that desire comes from to keep progressing?
That's a good question. That's like a Sean Evans question. That's Sean Evans, right? Host of Hot Ones, famous for
I think so. The
piercing questions that
Yes.
make you think.
Yes.
That makes me have to think, which means it's a good question. So the desire for progress comes from different places in different situations. Obviously, there's some just natural human desire for growth. That's why you have gamification of everything, and all of the games that are trying to get people addicted to games. It's what is the progression system? Like, what am I leveling up to? What rewards am I unlocking? And we just have that baked deep in our psyche that we want to feel like we are making progress. And people have used that commercially in a lot of ways. I have that more so in a financial and business sense entirely because of my parents. They were entrepreneurial throughout my life. I think I counted from when I can remember to when I was 18, 14 different businesses that they started or were involved in some way. And just that environment of we want to be better, we want to learn more. They were always reading and applying and learning and trying to figure out how can we do things better. So I got that influence from a very young age that not only can you accomplish whatever the thing is or can you keep growing or learning, but there are steps to do so and we want to be pursuing that.
Mm,
And
mm.
there's a little bit of a spiritual element. I'm a fairly spiritual religious person, and I believe that progress is part of that. Like the purpose of life is to learn and grow and to become better. And so yeah, lots of different angles all come together to form Dallin Cooper, a guy who really, really is a fan of moving forward.
Yeah, no, and that's great. I love that there's some of those seeds that were planted at a young age. That's really important. And the question for me, the question I feel like the reason I really wanted to ask, it allows us to just to give you a little bit more background into what you're doing now and who it is you're speaking to and the way in which you're emphasizing so much around this theme of progress, whether directly and sometimes indirectly. And we would have given you the introduction that you certainly deserve on the outset, but we're going to learn more about you as we go through this. Is this notion of, for you, this desire that you talk about and how we, as humans, we have decisions to make when it comes to that organic nature that we have to respond, because not everyone does respond. Like you're talking about, hey, I not only acknowledge that we have this baked in desire, but I then jump at it when I have the opportunity to. I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to get better. But Dallin, like, I think, and I'm with you, I'm right there with you, but I think we're in the minority. And so I'm just curious that when you hear me say that, talk a little bit to this world of speaking that you obviously operate in and that is your world today, and how you're able to show up and maybe speak to, hey, I not only understand the need for progress, but I jump at it, and this is why you should jump at it too. Like, where's the gap, and how do you help people start to bridge that gap between knowing and actually wanting?
Fear is a big part of the gap. I don't think it's the only gap, but we fear the unknown, and change is unknown.
Hmm.
We fear uncertainty, and change makes us uncomfortable. And a lot of times, growth is uncomfortable. Like, you're what, 200 some episodes in at this point? I'm sure it's not the first time that concept has come up.
Right.
The cliche, no growth in your comfort zone, no comfort growth zone, so on. I'm sure that's been said 800 times on here, but it continues to be true that a lot of people don't make those steps because those steps are hard and they're scary and you don't know what the future holds. Sometimes it's just that people don't have the bandwidth to process that difficulty. I don't know if this is a real thing. I've always called it survival mode, where you're just in a bad spot, you're overstressed, you're overworked. It's like right there with burnout as an idea, but I always called it survival mode because I shut down to how do we just get through this day? Bare minimum, like you are not forward thinking. You aren't thinking what's next year looking like. It's get through today, and then tomorrow I'll deal with getting through tomorrow. And people that are in survival mode don't usually have the brain space and the emotional bandwidth to deal with all of the fear and discomfort and unknown that comes with big change. So, and a lot of people are experiencing that. The stats are different depending on who you're talking about and what demographics, but like 40 to 70% of people are experiencing some form of burnout fairly frequently.
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot of people, given that burnout is associated with like heart disease and aneurysms and
Yeah.
anxiety and depression and addiction and all kinds of issues. So a lot of people just don't have the capacity. I never want it to come across as like, oh, the reason that you aren't growing or progressing is because you just don't want it bad enough. Because like sometimes that's true,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't just don't want it bad enough, but sometimes they don't have the resources they need to learn how to get out of the survival mode so that then they can build long term. That's that is huge. And then like I'm just full rambling, but the third thing that I think of when you ask that question is that there are some people who deep down they still feel that very human need for growth and for progress because we all have it. But I used the video game analogy earlier that it creates a sense of progress. A lot of society is kind of meant to hijack that natural desire and fill it without creating true progress. You know, so many you have so many apps that have streaks. I mean, thing like Snapchat, where you build the streak of how often you've Snapchatted with someone,
Hmm.
and it's that's a sense of progress. The numbers going up, it's getting bigger. I'm doing whatever. Again, all kinds of games and apps and entertainment have this, and those things aren't bad, but that helps fill our need for like I'm accomplishing something and growing. Well, you aren't actually accomplishing much or
Right.
growing very much, but it trips those circuits in a way that often it prevents people from feeling the itch deep enough to pursue deeper, more meaningful growth.
It's such an important insight, and for the record, I don't think you were rambling at all. I think I think you're making some fantastic points, because I think the message that's coming across through your insights is that there is an element of ownership that comes with growth, and to use your word, progress, and to say, okay, if I'm gonna make progress, then I have to take an element of ownership, and that means knowing the influences that are on me. I know a lot of what the work, the speaking that you're doing is with organizations and leaders, and helping them to maybe refrain from being assumptive, and focus more on intentional behavior. I don't want to speak for you, but that certainly comes across in some of the information that I've gotten to know about you. And usually that assumptive behavior comes with a lack of curiosity, right? We don't want to know. We don't want to know what it is that's limiting us. We don't want to know how we're maybe camouflaging what true growth actually is through an app, as you just gave that example. And I think there's something there now I can't help but want to learn more about, just from the way in which you're sharing and educating folks on some of these assumptive ways that we can behave, because I think you're already alluding to that in some of your insights. So I'm curious, when you are speaking to people and you're holding a room, you're working with an organization, how are you helping them see that maybe they are victims of sort of assumptive behavior? Obviously, I assume you're not jumping to conclusions, but at the same time, when you get in there, they're bringing you in to educate them on leadership and working better as organizations. So in some way, shape, or form, they must already be guilty of some assumptive behavior. So how are you maybe helping them learn a little bit more about some of the ways they may be guilty of that?
I like to trick people personally. That's my favorite strategy, whether it's parenting or speaking or doing a staff training. If I tell you you're doing something, then you'll be like, oh no, most people do that, but I don't. If I
Yeah.
can trick you into telling yourself you do it, then moment there. Like I already told you, I'm quite a religious person. The inspiration for that comes from the Old Testament. I don't know if you know the parable of the ewe lamb. It's like
Mm.
David, King David and Bathsheba and the whole deal that's pretty famous.
Yep.
The prophet Nathan came and told a whole story about a guy who in the kingdom had all these sheep, and then he had a neighbor who just had one little lamb, and the guy with all the sheep stole the little lamb and killed it and ate it for his feast or whatever. And he said, David, what should happen to that man? And David was like, we got to punish him so bad. That's horrible. Why would you, when you had so much, why would you take something that belonged to someone else and treat it so callously? And then Nathan looked at him and was like, I think he said, thou art the man or something like, it's you. It's a story about you, David.
Right,
And it was
right.
this huge moment of like, oh crap, I played myself.
Mm.
So as far as instruction, that's my favorite way to do it. My talking about how we all have that natural tendency to want to grow comes from the fact that I like to dabble in neurology. I am by no means a neuroscientist and I have no PhDs, but when it comes to human behavior and understanding it so I can help my clients and audiences, I need to understand how the brain works. So I do read a lot of research studies on behavior and neurology, and then I can use that to trick them. So if you say like, oh, if they're hiring me, they already know that they're probably guilty of making some of these assumptions, because that's what I do. I help people challenge assumptions.
Mm.
But it's not like it's everyone. Everyone makes assumptions
Right.
all the time, perpetually. Like this morning, you've already made 500, and
No
most
doubt.
of them weren't a big deal, and we aren't even aware of many of them. But I have various little activities asking them to draw something and then revealing that they drew it in a way that wasn't really what I was describing, but they assumed it was, and telling them like, hey, make sure you ask questions if you aren't sure about this thing I'm telling you to do, telling them to do the thing, and then later being like, why didn't you ask questions if you
Yeah.
did it wrong? And they're like, well, we didn't think to. And it's like, well, we never think to. I mean, I've developed all kinds of little tricks to
Yeah.
misdirect or play into our natural biases or tendencies where people very confidently say, I did the thing, or I have the answer, or I know what you're doing, and then I can pull the rug out and be like, it was actually this the whole time. And they're like, God dang it, I made the assumptions. Like, I did the thing, and it's really fun because I can warn them that I'm going to do it before I do it. I can do the setup, and then I can still get the payoff. And several of them, I'm not giving them out here because I rely on being able to
Of
trick
course.
people.
Yeah.
But several of them, I mean, I've used these tricks on thousands of people, never once. And I had someone who was a volunteer, was on stage. It ends up being a little like a magic show where you say like, I'm gonna lie to you. This is an illusion. I did it anyway. One of my volunteers said, he's like, so what would have happened if I had done this and done the thing you weren't expecting and broke the whole demonstration? I said, honestly, I'm not totally sure because no one ever has.
Yeah.
You're like, they just don't, because our brains are shockingly predictable. Like, yeah, there's differences, and I'm sure someone will call me on it one day, and we'll have a great illustration of. It'll be a positive demonstration of like, look, they did it. They didn't fall for the assumption. But yeah, it's people will understand that they need a concept so much more when they convince themselves that they need it than if I just show up and say, hey, your brain does this, you need to change it. Whereas if they see themselves doing it and say, ooh, I don't like that feeling, then they're ready to change because they've decided they're ready to change.
Mm. There you go. I love that. I mean, that right there is. I mean, I'm a coach, so naturally that is all growth that comes with the work that I do. It's one of the biggest pushbacks that I have in the whole coaching industry is that people are out there telling clients like, "Hey, let me tell you how to do this," and I'm like, "That's not actually how you get them to grow. That's not how you get them to take ownership for the growth, etc." When you can help them, when you can actually help them figure it out for themselves and come to that conclusion on their own, no matter how long before they come to the conclusion, what might be in their best interest or anything like that, that independence, if you will, around the discovery is when true individual growth at least can start to occur. I'm curious for you now. Let's go back a little bit because we met about 18 months ago at a National Speakers Association annual event. And I have to give a shout out to Joe Mull, because I'm sure one of us will at least encourage him to listen to this. But Joe was a common introducer to the two of us, a former guest on the show as well. And when I met you then, you were still very new to this speaking industry and probably consider yourself still new to it now. And as I was too. When you think about your growth journey to get to that point where you say, you know what, I'm incredibly aware of what I can do for a room of people and the way I can make that impact and how I can really serve them, whether it be organizations, individually, whatever it may be. I'm just curious, man. Like, how did that process occur from the, I guess, the infancy of the awakening of like, hey, this could be something I want to do, to the discovery of the commitment of actually saying, hey, this is me now. This is where I'm going.
That is a really interesting arc because the discovery of this is what I want to do lasted years.
Mm.
Ever since I was in middle and high school, and I did a lot of performance things, but specifically I did speech and debate, and I did improv and impromptu speeches, which is a whole deal. I mean, extemporaneous type things. And I got really good feedback. People saying, you are amazing at this. You could do this. You know how to hold an audience. You know how to convey a message and all of the things. And I thought, wow, the fact that there are people who this is their job, that's nuts. You have the school assembly. Someone comes to your school and tells you not to do drugs or whatever. The message is, I would watch those and be like, I feel like I could do that. But how do you even do that? So, right. I went to college. I started a digital marketing agency in college because I needed something I could do to make money that I could do with a laptop in a basement apartment as a college student. And that just kept me busy for a really long time.
Yeah.
Making money, surviving, building a family. I met my wife. We got married. We moved and graduated, and life started happening. And I have a record of it somewhere. It was 7 or 8 years ago, I think. I wrote on a little note card when my wife and I were newly married. We each got a little note card. We were nearing graduation, and we wanted to write one big goal that we would put on it. That would be our goal to work towards as our new life as not college students, married, gonna go be real functional adults. Mm-hmm. And on my little card, I wrote, get a speaking gig. It wasn't even like to get paid to speak somewhere. It's just have someone invite me to come speak to someone. And I wrote the little note card, and I think it was probably 5 years at least before that ever happened.
Yeah.
And largely it was because I spent a lot of that time in survival mode. Like there wasn't time to really work on it. I wasn't committed to it. I knew I wanted it, but not enough to face down the scary change. Like not enough to take the steps that would put me in an uncomfortable spot. So did the marketing agency thing. We ended up selling that like 2 months before COVID hit, which is a great time to sell a business, especially when selling that business comes with a guaranteed job managing the business with the new owner, right, with a pretty solid salary. And like suddenly things got really reliable. It was the first time in my life I had a salary where I just got paid every month, which was a really neat thing. We were expecting our first baby. The baby wants to eat every month. Who'd have guessed? And the bills want paid every month. And so that I became very comfortable with just dealing with right now. You've got a new baby. You are doing your job. My job had a lot of responsibility. I was busy. I was trying to fix up a disaster of a fixer-upper house. It's like there was too much to do. And I would say, if I was projecting things out there into the universe, I would say I wanted to be a speaker. I would say I want to write a book. I want to do these things, but it took me a long time to actually take the steps to do them. And then when I did them without wanting to commit very much. It was,
Mm.
I'll change my LinkedIn information to say, hey, I speak sometimes, but I'm not, putting in my 2 weeks notice or anything. I wrote a book on the side, in the evenings and stuff, and that it was fine. It's an okay book, but I wasn't putting as much time or money or effort into it as I would need to make an incredible book.
Hmm.
I wrote a good book, but I wasn't committed enough to make an amazing book. And that was kind of everything that I
Yeah.
was doing. I did eventually have a weird segue where I tangented into starting a dog chew manufacturing company. And that was the real wake up call. We had a 2 year old, we had a new baby, full time job, running a dog chew company on the side, which was suddenly becoming a very demanding side hustle. And for a time there, I was doing like 18 to 20-hour days
Yeah.
every day with a baby up in the night. I mean, just wild, wild, wild. And this was the year before we met. So the summer
Yeah.
of 2022.
Hmm.
We all got sick, the boys and my wife got better, and I had a fever for 7 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not healthy, it turns out, to have a
Mm.
fever for 7 weeks, and is
No.
usually a sign that you should do something about it.
Hmm.
I didn't. I didn't do something about it until I woke up one day, got partway through the day, and realized I had forgotten my own book launch because I was just moving through this fever induced haze every day, trying to make the dog chews and run the businesses and keep the kids alive. And that was my moment where I was like, okay, this isn't sustainable. I sold the dog chew business, started really saying like, what am I doing with my life? And like, where am I going? Clearly I have more things I could do than I have time for. It's like I don't even own a dog, but still here I am making a pet brand. And so it's like obviously there's plenty of opportunity, but what do I want to do? And I knew I could give up on the dream of speaking and I could go become a dog chew mogul. And I would have a lot of money right now if I had done that. Like if I had quit my job and gone all in on dog chews, that company is doing numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm good enough friends with the new owner that I'm aware of some of the numbers, and I'm like, man, that would be nice.
Yeah.
It sure would, but I knew it would mean giving up on the dream. So I sold
Mm.
the dog chews, and I struggling with timelines, but not too long after started getting serious about, okay, what's this look like if I'm going
Yeah.
to make the speaking thing work beyond just doing a couple local gigs for a few bucks here and there. And it took some while to build up to that, but at one point eventually I sold my house and my family moved 300 miles away to have better access to an airport. That move was the beginning of me transitioning out of my job. I mean, it was like 3 to 6 months notice, not 2 weeks, but
Hmm.
within 2 months of that move, I went to part time. And then 2 months after that, I had no job. And at the time I went to part time, I had zero events on the calendar,
Wow.
no revenue coming in, a new mortgage with a way worse interest rate, a new city that I was not familiar with and didn't have the support network for. Like, I look back at that time and think, are we idiots? Because it was really scary. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just like, I would never, if I was like business coaching someone, if
Right.
I was being an advisor or a consultant, I would never tell someone to do that
Right.
because I'd be like, there's risk taking and then there's being really stupid. But at the time, it felt like it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And we were like, if we're really desperate, nothing lights a fire under you. Like, hey, we might lose our house and my children are hungry.
Right.
And in that first year, just out of sheer panic of sales and then trying to execute on those sales, we made as much money, or if not more, than I did at my old, safe, cushy job.
There you
Now it all came like right at the breaking point.
go.
It was like, we're gonna push this till,
To this
are we
date.
gonna are we gonna
Right.
bail? Are we gonna
Right.
quit? Like, this is it. And then it starts coming together. Like, it was absolutely terrifying. You're just getting my whole life story now. But
You know what, man? I'm so glad because since we've changed the name of the show and we've gone. I wouldn't say we've gone in a different direction. We've just evolved, quite frankly, to this direction. This is the first time I've really given someone the space to give us that arc, as you put it there at the outset. Like it's a true arc it's an arc with a lot of bumps and twists and turns and all that kind of thing. And a couple of things that come through that though. Firstly, you were an example of everything that you're speaking to now. Like, again, you recognize you were in that survival mode and you've been able to somehow, well, during that time, sorry, you were able to somehow find enough direction, enough clarity, even if it seemed foggy within that clarity at times, to know, hey, I am taking the right step and it feels like the right step, no matter how scary it may be. Even if you look back now and go, man, that was just crazy. Why would I do that? Why did we do that? All this kind of thing, to just simply stop and say, okay, I was in survival mode. And for whatever reason, that wasn't allowing me to find fulfillment in my life. And I decided that I needed to shift. I needed to get out of survival mode and move into something that was much more authentic, much more natural, much more positive, much more empowering, etc. And something else, though, that came through there is that things didn't necessarily feel real until you actually assigned commitments to the steps. Like, you actually truly put some commitments down on the table. That's what I was hearing.
yeah, and you were there at the very beginning
Right?
when we both were like, we're gonna put down a chunk of money that we don't really feel like we have
That's
to
right.
go to this conference and learn the skills.
Yep.
So dropped a decent chunk of money, and suddenly when there's money in it, you get a lot more committed. One. And that's when I started doing the stuff, but the stuff, all of that, big vague nebulous cloud of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
didn't really see results until I committed very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that I said, I want to do this for 7 years. And then one day I said, I don't just want to do this, I am doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And 6 months later, it was my full-time job and providing very well for me. And like, I'm still fairly new to this, and I'm doing some cool stuff, like getting some cool opportunities to work with big companies and well-known organizations. And it's happened very quickly since I made the commitment. If you say, did it happen quickly from when you decided you wanted to? No, it didn't happen quickly at all. The first 6 or 7 years, nothing happened. And then I
Right.
said, no, it's not that I want to, I'm going to.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever it takes to do it, I'm going to do it. And suddenly it happened in 6 months. So,
There it is.
big
And
difference between I want to do the thing and I am going to do the thing, and I'm doing it right now.
absolutely. And I'm so glad that we've got here because so much of what we spoke to there at the beginning was, hey, how can we help people just justify the want, justify the want? But really, that is just a step. It's not the step, it's a step in this process. And I would love to believe that people listening to this are maybe sitting and starting to become more aware that there's a lot of things they've been talking about wanting for a really long time. And I know you're not telling people to do the same crazy thing that you yourself chose to do. I'm fully aware of that, and I want to put that in the small print right now. But the fact of the
Yes.
matter is, like, one thing I always like to sort of just do with a story like this is just kind of bring around a theme to it that maybe is worth explaining. Is that, through that 6 or 7 years, you couldn't be like annoyed or hard on yourself because really you weren't committing. You weren't making the commitment. So you can't really sit there and complain about the lack of the return because of the lack of the commitment. And I think that's something I really want to push forwards here is while we're not telling you to run off and quit your job and start some lavish idea right now, what I will say is that if you're going to sit in that place of wanting, you can't really sit there complaining at the same time. You kind of have to walk that fine line, right? It's just saying, hey, if you are just simply wanting but not necessarily going to go do it, then you really cannot complain about the situation you find yourself. I'm just curious, like, how does that sort of resonate with you?
Absolutely. There were many times that my wife and I had those conversations because she is, in addition to being my life partner, is very much my business partner. We started many businesses together, and I would say like, wow, I just really want to do this thing, but then I also, because I am accountable to her, I have to say like, but it's not like I've really made it a priority. And that's something that we've done for each other. She is an author. When I talk in podcasts like this and we say author, most of the time we're thinking the books that I would guess you or I write, where it's self-help, growth, business. She is a fiction author, fantasy, that type stuff. And she wrote her first book just as a fun exercise, and then I got to be the sounding board the other way, where she's like, it would be fun to publish this and get this out into the world, but like that's such an impossible task. Like the space is so crowded, finding an agent's impossible. Traditional publishing doesn't want a story like this that doesn't fit the mold. And so then we had the conversation of like, okay, do you actually want to publish it? Because if you do, we can make it happen. But we might have to do it weird, and there might have to be sacrifices and commitment, and eventually we decided to do that, and it's worked out very well. And over we've had those conversations of, okay, do I really want this? Or is it nice to just say that I want this? And if we really want it, what are you willing to sacrifice? Mm-hmm. Like what work are you willing to put in, and what commitment are you willing to make it happen? And there have been times that we've looked at that and said, no. I mean, that's the Dog Chew Company being a great example.
Absolutely.
I look at it and say, I want it to be successful, but I don't want to quit my job and go flesh bloody cowhides in a butcher shop all day, every day for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. I don't want it that bad. It would be money, but it wouldn't be fulfillment. And it's not worth what I would have to give up. And so we got rid of it. And while I sometimes get frustrated looking at its success, that it's like, I want that money and that success. Right. Like I made that choice because I wasn't willing to make that sacrifice, and I'm at peace with that. It's like it wasn't worth the cost. Yeah. And it is kind of just a big equation. Like if I truly want to achieve this outcome, what input am I willing to put in, and am I willing to pay that price? And it's a good question. A lot of times we get blind to that. Sorry, I don't know what our timeline is, but quick thought, because it's important.
Yeah.
Because our brains have all the biases that let me trick my audiences. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we miss the price. We think we know what it's going to take, or we think we know what the outcome's going to be. Because I just described that like a big equation of what will I input to get this output. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't know. We don't have the experience or the clarity of sight to know, which is why you absolutely need some form of counsel in your life. I've heard it called like your personal board of directors, your people that can go to that will slap you upside the head if you need it and say, you're being stupid. That's not how this works. A coach figure, a mentor, often all of these things, like some friends and family and coaches and mentors who you can consult on big decisions and have them say like, that isn't going to go as smoothly as you think. You can still absolutely do it, but the price is going to be more of this. It might be triple what you're expecting in time or money or commitment or sacrifice, and you need to be ready for that number. Are you willing to do it? Yeah. And having those people, because our own sight gets very fuzzy on topics that we're close to. So that's Just wanted to put that out there before anyone was
Yeah.
like, I've decided I'm willing to make the commitment.
Right, right. And again, that came through in the story just with how you how how you mentioned your wife numerous times, and it was something I was going to certainly emphasize myself anyway. So I'm glad that you did that for us to seek that counsel. But just even going back to that insight of the equation. Just to take that idea one step further, it also depends what you're trying to solve for, right? And I think something you said there was fulfillment, and I think that's what I love about this show is that this is not let's figure out a fast way to make a buck. That's not really what this show's about. There are shows like that out there. There's no doubt about it. That's just not what we do here. We growth. When we say growth on this show, our audience understands now it's that balance of the personal and the professional. And I think you even just simply acknowledging that, hey, the dog chew idea, while financially that would have put you in a wonderful position today, the cost and the lack thereof fulfillment, probably wouldn't have made it worth it in the long term. But to actually say, hey, if I'm going to solve for fulfillment, along with hopefully in time financial gain, there's that part. It's just like I've come to find, just with everybody that's come on the show, is that the finances follow the fulfillment. Like the fulfillment drives the financial security in time. It's why I'm so adamant that we should be trying to aspire to fulfill ourselves within our lives. And again, we're not talking about life-altering money. We're talking about money to stabilize, to live, and within our means, etc. So, anyway, I just wanted to really make that clear because I think that's what so resoundingly comes through in your story, Dallin. Is like, hey, you've been adamant about finding fulfillment. It's not just been about chasing a crazy dream or pursuing an idea. You've actually proven that you've tried that a few times and not necessarily gotten the fulfillment on the back end, and now you have this path of fulfillment.
Yeah, I love starting businesses. Like, this is number three.
It's in your DNA. It's in your 14 with your parents. Like, are you crazy?
That's I'm teaching entrepreneurship at a local community college, like just one class. It's what my degree is in. Like, it's my thing. And I had a moment driving back from an event the other day where I was talking to my wife, and I said, no matter what we've been doing and what business I've been running, I've always been caught by new ideas. Like, ooh, someone should do that. Like, that's a great business idea. Someone should jump on that. Like, maybe we should. Ooh, we could start that business. And I said, this is the first time in a really long time that I have basically no desire to start another business. Because, like, what would be the point when I am already doing all of the things I want to do? Like, it was a really great moment as someone who has severe shiny new thing syndrome to look around at all the shiny things and say, I already have the shiniest thing. And like, I don't need those ones. At least not right now. Like, come back in 15 years, who knows?
Who knows?
But at the moment, like, I'm happy with my shiny thing, and I'm just really enjoying it. So while it's easy to look at the large sums of money that the dog chews are making, it's like, I don't want that thing. And I made that choice. Yeah. I looked at it and I said, I can pick my dream or I can pick a bunch of money, and I'm going to pick my dream. And I'm pretty at peace with that.
Yep. You seem to be. And what better way to kind of bring this conversation to a close than an insight like that? And there's no better takeaway, in my opinion, than what you just shared, and to give people that, provide that catalyst for people to at least say, hey, if I have been sitting in a place of want for too long, maybe now's the time to seek that counsel, like you said, whether it be a spouse, a friend, family member, whatever it may be, just to get clear on, is this something I've just wanted, or is this something I truly want? And then to have that difficult conversation around the steps that are required to make it happen, or to let it slide and maybe go about finding something else you truly want to do, whatever it may be. But that's come through in abundance in this conversation. And man, I'm just so thankful that we've had this chance to have this conversation, to really get into more of the the intimate sides of how you've gotten to where you've gotten to, and built what you built. And the future clearly seems very bright, just in terms of you continuing to pursue that fulfillment, brother. So I'm excited for you. But before I let you go, please let everybody know where we can learn more about Dallin Cooper.
Shockingly, it's DallinCooper.com. I know that's going to blow your socks off. And most social medias, I'm mostly on YouTube and LinkedIn. There's not a lot of Dallin Coopers, that's Dallin. But I will shamelessly plug my wife's books. It's called the Portlock Trilogy. First book's named Silverskin. Katie Cooper, spelled like a maniac, Caitee, because she never wanted her name spelled right. Anyway, katiecooper.com, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places. Always hype your wife.
Definitely. And my wife is she's not an avid listener, but she listens once in a while. But I'll make sure that she listens to this one because she is a huge fictional fan, let's put it that way. So hopefully I can help her continue to add to her collection. But Dallin, appreciate your time, brother. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And just best of luck with everything in your world moving forward.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And my thanks again to Dallin for joining us on this episode. And there was something that he provided within our conversation that I have to emphasize here, in that society will hijack our desires. It may not be the obvious thing that I'm able to pull from this conversation, but the reason I do it is I want to emphasize the importance of protecting what it is you want, protecting what it is you're going after. If you're willing to do the work around the boundaries that you put around yourself, the likelihood of you protecting and then doing the work required to get what you want is immediately increased. We sometimes don't appreciate how great the influence on us is from those around us. If those around us don't want the same things that we want, they don't necessarily want to support us. They may not even know that they are pulling away from our ability to grow, to ready ourselves for what we want. Because most of the time, people have no idea how they are influencing and impacting others. So you need to have a heightened awareness to what you need around you, but more so, what you don't need around you. Because folks will try to hijack some of these dreams, some of these desires that you want in your life. So how good a job could you be doing, or how better of a job could you be doing when it comes to protecting yourself and ensuring that people aren't able to get close enough to you to hijack these goals and these visions that you have for yourself when you think about your growth journey and what you want to achieve within your career and within your life. So I really appreciate so much of Dallin's insights, but specifically, I felt the need to really emphasize that one because sometimes we get so focused introspectively on this show, understandably so, we don't necessarily consider some of the outside and external influences that can be on us. So just a friendly reminder on giving that some attention today. But as always, folks, the show continues to go on. Dallin is just the most recent in a number of fantastic episodes that we've got recorded. We're going to see you all the way through the remainder of 2024 and already have episodes in the can, so to speak, for 2025. So it's very exciting to see the momentum that is growing around the concept of Growth Ready. And as we now build into the end of the year, heading into 2025, no better time to be thinking about your growth and what you're doing to get ready for anything and everything you're trying to achieve in the future. So, as always, folks, best of luck with anything and everything you've got going on in your world. Don't be shy. Make sure you either reach out to me, steve@growthready.com, or share the show with somebody as well that you know it can be of impact. And until next time, folks, take care. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.